Safety first. So, I think probably everybody knows Mayor Judy, really doesn't need an introduction, but Bob, this is the first opportunity you had to join the SHPOA membership meeting in person since you joined the borough. So, if you would mind, taking a moment, if you'd like to talk to us.
Absolutely, thank you very much. What I'd like to do in the meantime is have something distributed, if you don't mind. Tony had mentioned that maybe there's some interns that could help with it. Originally, it was placed out at the front desk and on the side. There's probably not enough room, or there's probably not enough copies here for everybody, but you know, we can share. And I'll explain the document that's being distributed in a minute or so. I'm just going to take about 30 seconds literally and run through my resume over the last 35 years. I'm a graduate of Rutgers University in New Brunswick. I was a political science major, and in my last semester, I took an internship in Washington, D.C., working for the United States House of Representatives. That ended up turning into full-time employment. And while I was working in Washington, I developed a real love for government in general. That led to a lot of opportunities, both educational as well as career-wise, as well as being an elected official. And so my launch from Capitol Hill, if you will, would be my immersion itself into elected politics. I was a county commissioner in Gloucester County. I was also a member of the legislature, the New Jersey General Assembly, where I chaired, and I like to remind Laura of this, I chaired the Committee of Natural Resources, and I was able to become very familiar with a lot of the issues that are relevant to Stone Harbor. I also had the opportunity for a short period of time to serve as the mayor of Washington Township, which is a community of about 50,000 people right outside of Philadelphia. So I have a vast amount of experience in the area of government. I also, during this period of time, had the opportunity to go to law school. I did practice law. Most of my law practice concentrated in the area of land use, state regulation with Pinelands Commission. I was a prosecutor for 17 years, and I also did criminal defense work. So all of that, I think, has brought me to a point in my life where I was primed, if you will, to serve as an administrator. Prior to coming to Stone Harbor, I had the opportunity to serve in two other municipalities, very large municipalities, compared to Stone Harbor. One was Washington Township, where I live, and the other was Kearney, which is up in Hudson County. Completely different. If anybody is familiar with Kearney, New Jersey, and Hudson County compared to Stone Harbor. But nevertheless, that's just a real quick overview of my background. I am tremendously grateful to be here in Stone Harbor. This was my childhood seashore area. My grandparents and my aunt and uncle had a place right out on the boulevard, each of them. And so as a child, I spent a lot of time here, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be the administrator here in Stone Harbor. That's a real quick resume, and I'm not going to try to eat up too much more time here, but I did prepare about a month into my tenure as the administrator here in Stone Harbor, a visual mission statement, and about a month later, the pandemic hit, and it was basically filed. But I thought that this is the opportunity that I can weave in some of the thoughts that I had when I first got here. I took the mission statement, I reduced it to a visual, and for me, it's been guidance as I act as the administrator here and serve as an advisor to the mayor and council.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. All right, so let's kick it off. What this will be is basically, we took a lot of feedback from you, the members, throughout the year, but also in preparation for this, about the things you were interested in talking about. So we boiled it down to about 5 or 6 questions that I'll report to Mayor Judy and Bob, and let them answer. I want to touch on one thing, though. We've had recently some feedback feedback from asks about the Ocean Wind Park, discussion about Ocean Wind. And just to be clear, we're not going to, that's not on the agenda for this meeting, we're not going to discuss that particular issue. And the reason has nothing to do with not wanting to discuss it. The reason is simply, if we were to have a discussion of Ocean Wind right now with the several groups, we basically talk about nothing other than what's publicly available, because that's all we know. So what our plan is, we're striving to try to get representatives from Ocean Wind, and possibly from the state, to join us in September for our September members. In the same way as you may recall with the polls issue, we have representatives from Atlantic City Electric come in and actually discuss the project. So we want to bring some expertise in, so that when you have questions, or you want to get your question answered, it's going to come from somebody that actually knows what's going on, versus if you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you the same thing that you could find by reading it online, because that's all I know, and that's all it is. So I just wanted to clarify that. We're not avoiding it, but we want to really have a meaningful discussion about Ocean Wind. So we're going to ask to put it off until we can get the proper representatives to join us. And we're working hard to get that done. So just want to cover that. So question one, this was a good one. After a long period of time, it feels as though we're going to see a return in some form to the Stone Harbor we all know and love. So as a starting point, Bob and Mayor Judy, what are your expectations for the coming summer season? And you can stay seated.
I feel like I should stand so you folks can see me and hear me properly. So before I answer the question that was just posed, I just want to welcome everybody home and say, you know, it's good to see your faces and welcome back, and that leads me right in to answer the question. This summer, what I anticipate and what appears to be is we're going to have a summer, I think, that harkens back to pre-COVID, back to 2019. Folks are coming back, and if there's any indication that we can look at this early on, one would be that when you look at beach tax sales, our beach tax sales May 31st of last year were down $130,000 as opposed to this year, but our sales are identical to May 31st of 2019. So that trend kind of shows that people are preparing to be here. I think last year what folks were doing is they were waiting to see what was going to happen before they bought their beach tags. So folks are buying their tags like they did pre-COVID, indicating they plan on being here and they plan on having life as usual here at the shore. And one of the other things, our programs this summer are going to be going back to how they were. Our tourism programs are coming back. Our Tuesdays at the Tower, they're going to start right after the 4th of July. Our fireworks are on via the barge off the 95th Street Beach, so that's back. We've also added a couple of larger events. We're adding a Festival of Lights food truck festival at the 80th Street from Marina for those folks who have no friends on the bay and have nowhere to go to watch the boat parade. So we're adding that. You don't have to stand at a street end. So what we want to do is have like a community gathering there at 80th Street. So we're adding that. We're also adding what we're calling Beach Fit Fest. So it's going to be a fitness festival that is the same weekend as the Stone Harbor Triathlon. The Stone Harbor Triathlon is back after that 1 year hiatus. Our recreation programs are in full swing. So to answer the question, summer's on, and I think we're going to feel like we did in 2019.
You all see me at that Stone Harbor Fit Festival. All right, question two. A lot of questions about the budget and the budget process. And I summarize it this way. So the borough's recently completed, for those of you that have been following it, the 2021 budget preparation and approval process. There was a great deal of time and work that went into that by Mayor and Council, probably more than I can ever remember in my 16 years as a homeowner here. There were a lot of amendments. The tax rate came down by 1 cent from the originally proposed tax rate. But the budget still has several significant expenditures. We have established a paid fire department here in Stone Harbor this year to enhance public safety. There was compensation increases that were paid to try to achieve market rates and bring in the services that are necessary. So again, an awful lot of work took place. So the question really is, looking back on it, any perspectives, any thoughts that Bob, you or Judy would like to offer about the process, and including what you expect going forward? And I'm going to, Bob, start with you.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you very much. This is my first opportunity to ask that everybody just take a peek at the mission statement. And within the center of it, you will find arguably what is the most important aspect of it, and that is zero-based budgeting. This is something that Councilwoman Ginsburg spoke about a lot during the budget process. I think what we're going to do is to go back to, if you will, a greater emphasis on zero-based budgeting, and that is to make a determination in advance, and this is my opportunity to weave in some information about what SHPOA has been working on, and that is long-term capital and operational budgeting. But it's an opportunity to take a real close look at what your needs are and then build your budget from there, as opposed to beginning at a point what might have been in the past, meaning just carrying over numbers from the previous year. We're going to be building up. In terms of the process, I see more committee work prior to the actual budget document being introduced to the council in general. That's certainly been the topic of conversation as we proceeded through this budget process. I do see a lot more of the committee work being done earlier in the year, like September and October, and getting back to basically what the ordinance says. So those are two differences that I see from my perspective. I think it's always important, regardless of your mission statement, regardless of your operational needs, regardless of your goals, that what you need to keep in mind is that budgeting is probably the single most important aspect of running a municipality, and that's why you'll find it contained within the center, touching all other aspects of government here in Stone Harbor.
So this budget process was arduous, to say the least. In the 12 years that I've been on this governing body, we've never introduced the budget only to withdraw it and reintroduce again. It was definitely difficult. There was a couple of things. I wasn't sure if that was somebody here heckling, but it's a boot camp. Good, that's good. Anyway, so the budget as introduced had an increase of, I'm going to just throw some numbers out there, not specific, but just to give you an idea, of $650,000 that could be attributed to the paid fire company and the increase in public works wages. And the bulk of that, $650,000, could be attributed to those two departments, which ran somewhere around a total of $550,000. So then there was some incidentals that added to that. Two other things were put on top of that increase that are not going to occur again in 2022. And those two things are, number one, we lost approximately $380,000 in revenue due to COVID. If you will remember, we didn't turn meters on, was one of the things we did. Our recreation programs were cut significantly. That's some of the aspects of the revenue we did not receive. In addition to that, we owed $335,000 emergency appropriation to the prior year budget. Those two items together is $700,000 that we are not going to see in the 2022 budget. So when you take the original budget, which was that $650, and then you add that $700, it came to $1.3 million increase in the budget. So to bring it back down to the original introduction, we decided to lower the amount of money that we were going to put into the Beach and Bay Fund. Now, of course, that was a decision we struggled with because that was a commitment that we made a couple of years ago, that we would continue to increase what went into that fund. However, that being said, we did not anticipate COVID, did not anticipate that drop in revenue. How could we? And that's half of it. But as far as that emergency appropriation for the lifeguard wages the year before, that was something that we need to take responsibility for and was an oversight on our part. So, what I'm basically trying to, I will reiterate, I guess, is the fact that those two things, $700,000, are things that we will not be having to put into the 2022 budget. So, in essence, we were slammed in a couple of ways. COVID, of course, I don't know how long we can use that excuse. Probably it's about time we stopped using it. However, we did lose $380,000 in revenue, and we had to make up for that. We are going to change our budget process. There is going to be a lot more committee work, and it is going to start a lot earlier. There is some things, and I don't know if Bob still wants to talk to this, or as far as some direction that he specifically has been given on what to look at in the future. Do you want me to cover that? Do you want to cover that as far as... So some of the things, for example, that Bob is being tasked with doing is taking a very serious look at what can be outsourced, what can be privatized, and also just taking, I'm trying to put the other, user fees. Should we be looking at our beach tag fees? Should we be increasing our beach tag fees? So one of the things that, if let's say theoretically we increase our beach tags by $15 per season tag. So when you first hear that, you think to yourself, okay, a season tag would now be roughly $43. We're accustomed to paying under 30. Your initial reaction is, that's a lot of money. But then when you think to yourself, it is $15 for the entire summer for access to the beach. $15 times all those tags, and now what we do on the beach as far as lifeguards, as far as protecting it, as far as raking, as far as maintenance, it starts to pay for itself. The user fee pays for the beaches. So that is one of the things that Bob has been tasked with, is looking at how should we raise those fees, and if so, how much. And it also is important to us that we remain reciprocal with Avalon, and we've begun those discussions with Avalon, so we'll be on the same page as far as the beach tags. So that's another thing that Bob is tasked with looking at. Well, of course, there's been a lot of talk about the trash and recycling. Should we outsource our trash? And this is something that I would really like to hear from folks about. Because as you all know, we really have a fabulous public works department. They're coming behind our homes and getting our trash and bringing our cans back. And by the same token, you ride through any other community but Stone Harbor, you're going to know when it's trash day. Here in Stone Harbor, you don't know when it's trash day. But that is another thing we are going to look at. Really, nothing's off the table, but we really would need to hear from you. What services are you folks happy with paying for, and want to see continued? So we need to hear from you. And the other thing is the 10-year financial plan, which SHPOA has really been an advocate for some time. So Bob is tasked with starting to lay out, along with the Administration and Finance Committee, that 10-year plan. It is, I don't want to use the word traditional, what's the word I'm looking for? It is customary, I suppose, for government to have somewhere along the line of a 5 to 7 year plan. And that's normally what we operate within, especially when it comes to the capital budget. some examples of perhaps how we could use this 10-year plan is perhaps in year one, you look at whatever capital projects are needed for the Public Works Department, year two, public safety, year three, recreation. And if in year one, someone proposes a recreation capital project, it's not in the plan, we got to put that off for 3 years, we'll do that in year three. That's one way to perhaps structure that 10-year plan. So that is another thing that the administrator has been tasked with. And again, no aspect of the borough is off the table. We really need to look at all of it.
Just to give a little bit of context, Councilman Moore, who was liaison to SHPOA, had made a suggestion and a motion. I'm getting waived. Is that 20 seconds left for this segment?
20 minutes for the whole thing.
Okay. So do we have enough time?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try to make it quick because I know we're each probably talking a little bit longer than what we anticipated. But Councilman Moore, a month or so ago, made a motion at the behest of SHPOA, and it is basically what the mayor had outlined, those aspects, those 5 or 6 aspects. I want to make a comment as an aside. I have been truly amazed at the talent of the individuals that come from the leadership of SHPOA. For example, and I'm not just saying this because Rich is sitting to my right, but when you have a CPA from Price Waterhouse retired coming to you talking about how we might improve our budget process, how we may take a different look at what we're doing, we find that tremendously helpful, and that's part of the process here. And so Rich sat down with the CFO and I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he laid out the spreadsheet, and he said, this is what I envision, and this is how I think is going to help the borough, its residents, and the property owners here. And we agree that much of what, if not everything that was presented by SHPOA through Councilman Moore is going to be beneficial. And that is benefiting everybody. And we think in the long run that we're going to be much better off. The 10-year financial plan. And I'll just give you a very practical example of what Rich said. He said, if you decide to spend a certain amount of money on a capital project in, say, 2025, all you need to do is take that number, plug it into that year, and run it out over the next 10 years, and you will know precisely what the fiscal impact is going to be on the borough. So we are aggressively pursuing the suggestions of SHPOA. We think they are good ones. The mayor had outlined all 5 of them, and you can rest assured that the CFO, myself, the administration, and Finance Committee, and Councilman Moore, we're going to be working through these questions, and we're going to be coming back to council, full council, presenting our findings that we think is going to be very helpful for the governance of the borough.
Thanks, Bob. Much appreciated. Thanks for the shot. Very quickly, folks, on this point, we've surveyed you in the past on issues, and again, we've offered to Mayor, Council, and to Bob that if you want feedback, you can use us as a way to gain feedback because we have access to all of you and many others. As I said, we have probably about 1/3 of the homes in Stone Harbor right now we have as SHPOA members. So we can gain access to a lot of people. So if that's something, we're working very closely and very collegially with the Mayor and Council on these issues. And to the extent they want feedback and they want us to gather it, we will be that source. So do not be surprised if you see us come out to you several times during the year, the coming year, with surveys. And the background for that would be trying to gain insights, your insights, so that we can pass it back to Mayor and Council and they can consider your viewpoints when they're making the decisions. The issues, I follow this process very closely. I've participated in all the council meetings. They're tough issues. We're not, the easy things are done. We're now facing, a lot of real challenges, and I give a shout out to the Mayor, the members of council, to Bob Smith, our administrator, to Jim Kraft, our CFO. They're working really hard on your behalf. You might not think so, but trust me, they are. So that's just my observation on a personal side. So I'm going to jump to the next question. Mayor Judy, the last council meeting, there was discussion I think you led about the Army Corps of Engineers and a back-based study, which they're undertaking. And what I took from it, it's intended to focus on identifying methods to reduce coastal storm risks for Monmouth County south of Cape May. Can you share what's known so far and for the members, kind of what to expect and what is expected to come out of the study or how it's going to be processed and what impact might it have on them?
So this New Jersey Risk Management Back-Based Study from Monmouth County to Cape May County is part of a larger study on the North Atlantic coast, where 9 areas were identified as areas that needed to increase their risk management as far as back bays and flooding. So this project is falling under the auspices of the Army Corps of Engineers. So the Army Corps of Engineers is a federal agency that is tasked with certain things. And one of their tasks is risk management as far as disasters, hurricanes, flooding, so on and so forth. So the Army Corps of Engineers partners with a local agency to address the issues in your particular area. So here in the state of New Jersey, from Monmouth County to Cape May County, the Army Corps of Engineers has partnered with the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, specifically the Office of Coastal Engineering. So what are they doing? Probably the easiest way for us folks who are not engineers to understand this is by looking at what has happened with our dunes and our beach nourishment projects over the last 23, 24 years. Many of you can remember when we did not have dunes, when there was rocks that led up to a bulkhead, when folks could sit underneath the 95th Street Pier to get out of the sun, and then they had to scoot out when the water came up underneath the pavilion there. Well, now when you look, it's hard to believe that our ocean came that far up, that those waves actually came that far up. And that did not occur naturally. That occurred because the problem was identified, beach nourishment began, dunes were built, and now we have a stable dune along our ocean front. We need to do the same thing on our bay front. And as you saw in our ocean front, that didn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight on our bay. So what is happening with this study is, just as happened along the ocean front, the weak areas are being identified, there are solutions being identified, what's the best solution for which areas, what do we need to do we need levees, do we need to raise our houses, if so, how high? These are the things that are going to come out as a result of the study, what the recommendations are. Now, the study started several years ago and ran out of funding. So now the funding is there, and the study is now back full force. There's going to be public hearings this summer, and the full study is expected to be out in 2023, what the recommendations are going to be for specific areas. Stone Harbor has actually positioned themselves well because in 2017, I want to say, coming out of the Natural Resources Committee was developed a committee, Flood Mitigation Committee. Out of the Flood Mitigation Committee came recommendations for increased bulkhead heights. So our bulkhead heights are now at 8 feet for new bulkheads. So just as the folks who lived across the ocean front were struggling with the fact that they lost their ocean view because the dunes were built up, folks along the bay are experiencing similar growing pains as the homes next to them are coming up so high. So, the best way to understand what the study is, what the purpose is, and what Stone Harbor needs to do is to compare it to what happened to our ocean front. We need to shore up our bayfront. We need to raise our houses. That is the essence of what this study is and what Stone Harbor needs to look at moving forward. There is a lot of folks who are expressing angst with what they're seeing happen along the bayfront. We need to raise the bulkheads up. We need to raise those homes up. We identified that several years ago. We're going to see that is going to be a recommendation in the study. We are ahead of the game and have positioned ourselves well.
Thank you. So more to come on that, folks. Much more to come. We're in the early stages of this, but I think it is important. And for those of you that have been following the SHPOA program for a number of years, the sustainability program, flood management is one of the 4 legs of the stool. And it was something we would agree that has to be looked at because there's been an increase in the levels and the frequency of flooding in the island. So anything needs to be done to try to help mitigate that, to try to help manage it, I think will be welcome, particularly by those people who live in those particular areas that are impacted by flooding. So I'm going to throw the final question out, and this is kind of I'll call it a fun one, if you will, but it's one I actually came up with. So maybe you can find it interesting, you can throw eggs at me. But looking forward, Mayor Judy, Bob, 10 years from now, what's going to be different in Stone Harbor than we experience today? And what's going to be the same than we are seeing today? We'll give this one to the mayor first.
I asked Bob if you wanted to go first. So what are we going to see different in 10 years? There's a couple of things that hopefully there are projects that 10 years ago I envisioned that I hope come to fruition, and we're moving that way in the next 10 years. And a lot of that is taking place right here in the North End. One of the things that I've watched, when I was a police officer and I would be driving around endlessly and I would go through that 80th Street Marina and I would think to myself, there's never anyone here. This is the most underutilized asset in this town. And I would be the lonely car making its way through. And even in the middle of summer, very few vehicles would be parked there. Beautiful sunsets. Wide open access to the bay for all those folks who do not have access to the bay. So we've tried over the years different ways. How can we beautify it? How can we get folks to 80th Street? We tried having concerts there, but you're standing in a barren asphalt parking lot, not particularly enjoyable, no restrooms. So one of the things that we have done now, we've applied for an open space grant, the county, to beautify that marina, to make it a draw for folks, add shade, soften that asphalt, add some increased areas for stand-up paddleboards and kayak launching, add restrooms. We can start doing maybe weekly concerts or events there once we add these improvements. As it is now, it's not an enjoyable place to be. We also would be putting a walkway across the front for folks to be able to walk along. Upgraded fish cleaning stations, things of that nature. So we've applied for this open space grant with the County of Cape May, and it has been received well. And it is a project that they would fund 50% of. So we're in the process of going through with that application. Hopefully that comes to fruition. We would like to see that marina become a destination for residents, tourists, even from this motel area. Imagine how many people could enjoy that. The other thing in this North End, and anybody who was listening on the council meeting last, would be what during a utilities meeting about 9 years ago, I coined Stone Harbor West. And what that was a discussion where we thought, why don't we buy a piece of property offshore in a non-residential area where we can store some of these items you see throughout town, sitting places like the beach concession stands, this big deuce-and-a-half truck that's down at the fire company, all these things we put places. What if we were to beautify that area in the North End, remove part of our public works function into an area offshore, sell those lots to pay for that acquisition, And while you're doing that, you're also increasing the property values and essentially doing the folks that live in that neighborhood a favor by finally cleaning up the areas around them. We've been looking for places to purchase for going on 9 years. We've identified one. We're in negotiations. Now, one of the things that I have heard is folks are saying, well, how's Middle Township feel about this? How do those folks feel about Stone Harbor dumping their storage and their public works activities out here on our property? You know, who do they think they are? They're going to dump their trash on us. So I have already started conversations with the mayor of Middle Township. I've already spoken to him about how we can make this a win-win. We can have shared services agreements with the Township of Middle to help them offset any costs that they're going to lose because of the loss of the rateable. And also just so we're good neighbors. We're always doing what we can for our constituents, and we have to understand that so are they. So they've got somebody they represent, we have folks we represent. What can we do where we're representing everybody, and it's to the advantage of everybody? So we've begun those talks, and I think that that is something that it's exciting for Stone Harbor. It should be particularly exciting for the folks that have been living in that area for all these years, and they're in the middle of a public works operation and they're a vacation home. So those two things, of course, are major. Everyone knows the Villa. We're going to see a beach block of 112th Street. I mean, that's, of course, a major change that we're going to see in the next 10 years. But what I anticipate most is that change here in our north end.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Is there any time left? That was a joke at my boss. She didn't think it was funny. I don't. So I think what I want to do is try to answer the question and also refer back to the document that some of you may have in your hand. What do I see for Stone Harbor 10 years from now? I see that we are focusing on infrastructure, beach and bay, our environmental stewardship, and there's a fourth category, and it took me a while to try to think about it and articulate it, and that is the charisma of Stone Harbor. There is a certain intangible, at least in my mind, that Stone Harbor has that no other beach town in the state of New Jersey has, and it's something that we need to concentrate on. I think that we're going to be well prepared in terms of our fortification of the beach and the bay by virtue of the planning that we're doing today. And I want to just drop back to two questions and just add to what the mayor had previously said about the Army Corps of Engineers study. We do have a long-term plan, we have a medium plan, and we have a short-term plan. And we are concentrating on each, but I just want to give you a real quick example of what we've done today in terms of flooding. Not just with the ordinance, but we've recently have purchased something that we've been talking about that has arisen from the Sustainability Committee, and that is aqua fence that's going to be installed right in this north area of Stone Harbor so that we can immediately address some of the flooding issues that we have. So in my mind, I see Stone Harbor very well positioned in all the categories that I talked about because in large measure of what this governing body is doing with the import and support of SHPOA. So that is a basic overview of how I see Stone Harbor.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. So basically, one thing we can be sure of is that it will change. And I hope you feel that it will change for the better. But again, we're your voice in Stone Harbor. So keep your comments coming, keep your suggestions coming. As I mentioned to you, we pass everything through Councilman Moore, and it gets to the mayor, to council, and is taken under consideration. They may not act the way you want them to act, but they do consideration, I can assure you that. So a lot happening, a lot more to happen, and we'll be all over. With that, I'm going to ask you to join me in saying thank you, Mayor Judy, and to Bob.